Maya Williams was used to blending into the background at Jefferson High School. She wasn't the loudest, she didn't dress in the trendiest clothes, and she certainly wasn't the one who stood out in the hallways. But Maya didn't mind. She preferred the quiet, the peace. Her headphones were her sanctuary, a place where the outside world couldn't touch her. When she walked down the hallways, her eyes were usually on the ground, making sure she didn't attract any unwanted attention. But on that particular morning, as she sat down in her first class, something in the air felt different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the usual whispers from the back of the classroom were louder today. Maybe it was just her, or maybe they were louder than usual. Her classmates, the popular crowd, were talking, laughing, and snickering. Maya tried her best to ignore them, but it was impossible. She could feel their eyes on her. The group of boys sitting near the back were always the loudest. Jason, their leader, was the one who usually had something to say, and today was no different. "Look at her, guys," Jason whispered loudly enough for Maya to hear. "She's a walking shadow." The others laughed, but Maya kept her head down, pretending not to hear. She had gotten used to this over the years. Jason and his friends were notorious for making fun of her. They didn't know her, none of them did, but they didn't need to. To them, Maya was just another target. "Hey, Maya!" Jason's voice cut through the noise of the classroom. "What's wrong? You don't like the attention?" Maya winced but didn't respond. She kept her focus on her notebook, her fingers nervously gripping the pen. She could feel her pulse racing. Why did it always feel like her heart was about to burst out of her chest whenever he spoke to her? Jason, noticing her lack of response, pushed further. "What's the matter, huh? Cat got your tongue?" The other students snickered, and Maya felt her stomach twist. She wanted to say something, anything, but she knew from experience that responding only made things worse. So she stayed silent, kept her head down, and tried to escape into her thoughts. But it was hard. It was always hard to ignore the looks, the whispers, the laughter. Every time she thought she was safe, it came back. The mocking, the cruel remarks. Jason, not getting the reaction he wanted, stood up and walked over to her desk, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. The class fell silent as he approached, his eyes locked on hers with that familiar smirk. He leaned in close, just inches from her face. "Why don't you ever fight back, huh?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're just a scared little girl, aren't you?" Maya froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She hated this. She hated feeling small, weak, invisible. She knew he was pushing her, trying to get under her skin. But Maya had been through this before. Over and over again, she had learned how to endure the insults, the mockery. But something was different today. Something inside her was starting to change. Maya wasn't the type to fight. She had always kept her distance, her quiet strength coming from within. But what Jason didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maya was not as defenseless as they thought. Beneath the surface of the quiet, shy girl was a warrior, a trained fighter. She had been practicing mixed martial arts, MMA, for years, honing her skills with every class, every punch, every kick. Her mother, a former MMA fighter herself, had started training Maya when she was just 10 years old. It had been a way for her mother to pass on her knowledge and protect her daughter from the dangers of the world. But it was also something deeper. It was Maya's way of building strength, not just in her body, but in her mind and spirit. She had learned the discipline and the control that came with martial arts, something that set her apart from the rest. She wasn't just learning to fight. She was learning to stay calm, to think strategically, to know when to step back and when to act. But no one knew that. To everyone else, Maya was just a quiet girl who liked to keep to herself. They didn't know the strength she carried inside her. They didn't know that she could end Jason's taunts with a single move if she wanted to. Her mother had always told her, "It's not about fighting, Maya. It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away." And Maya had learned that lesson well. She had always walked away, taking the insults and the bullying without fighting back. But today she felt a change. Today something was different. Her body tensed and her hands clenched into fists. The anger, the frustration, everything she had kept bottled up inside her for years began to rise. Jason's mocking smile only seemed to grow. "You're not going to say anything, are you? You're just going to sit there like the little weakling you are?" That was it. Maya's resolve cracked. For the first time in years, she stood up. Her body moved before her mind could even catch up. The moment her feet hit the floor, she felt a rush of power surge through her. She wasn't just standing up to him. She was standing up for herself. The room seemed to fall silent as Maya faced Jason, her posture straight, her gaze steady. Jason looked surprised, caught off guard by her sudden reaction. He wasn't used to seeing Maya stand up to him. He stepped forward, expecting her to back down. But Maya didn't move. With a quick motion, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it so that his arm was forced behind his back. Jason gasped in pain and the class went quiet. No one moved. For a moment, everything stopped. Jason struggled, trying to break free, but Maya held firm. Her training kicked in. Every move calculated and controlled. She didn't want to hurt him, but she wasn't going to let him push her around anymore. She twisted his arm further, forcing him to the ground. The class stared in shock, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Maya stood over him, her heart pounding, her breath steady. She hadn't expected to do this, but it felt right. For the first time, she was in control. She had shown them that she wasn't the weak, quiet girl they thought she was. Jason, now on the ground, looked up at her, his face a mix of shock and fear. He had underestimated her, and now he saw the power she had been hiding all along. He tried to scramble to his feet, but Maya was already walking away, her head held high. She had done what she needed to do, and now it was over. Maya didn't care about the stares or the whispers that followed her as she walked out of the room. She had made her point. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She was stronger than anyone had ever realized. And today, she had finally taken control of her own story. The hallway felt different as Maya walked through it, her heart still racing from the encounter. Every step felt heavier than the last, but the adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, keeping her moving. She didn't know why she'd acted the way she had. It wasn't like her. For years, she had kept her distance, avoided conflict, and stayed out of the spotlight. But today, something had snapped. Something deep inside her had been triggered. Something she'd been suppressing for far too long. She could still feel the tension in her fingers. The way her body had reacted instinctively. The power of her training taking over. It was as if everything she had learned in the MMA gym, everything her mother had taught her, had suddenly become real. For the first time, Maya had used it to protect herself. It wasn't just about the fight, though. It was about standing up for who she was, showing the world that she wasn't the weak girl they thought she was. But as she made her way to her next class, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of what had happened. She had crossed a line, and now there would be consequences. Jason wasn't the type to take defeat lightly, and Maya knew that. He was the school's golden boy, the one everyone looked up to. He had a reputation to uphold, and she had just shattered it. Maya could almost feel the storm brewing in the distance, the storm that was sure to come after her actions. By the time the bell rang for the next class, Maya had already received several messages on her phone. Texts from her friends, all of them asking if she was okay. They had seen what happened in the cafeteria. They had heard the whispers, the rumors spreading through the school like wildfire. Maya had expected the attention, but she wasn't prepared for how quickly things escalated. The messages weren't what she had anticipated. She had expected support, encouragement even, but what she received instead was a mixture of shock, awe, and in some cases, fear. People were talking about her, but it wasn't the kind of talk that made her feel good. It was the kind of talk that made her feel like a stranger in her own school. One message in particular stood out. It was from Aisha, a girl she had known since middle school. Aisha had always been kind to her, but even her message left Maya feeling uneasy. "Are you okay? I heard what happened with Jason. You should be careful. He's not someone you want to make an enemy out of. People are talking." Maya stared at the screen for a long time, reading the words over and over again. Aisha was right. She didn't want to make an enemy of Jason. But then again, it wasn't about him. It was about her. It was about finally doing something for herself instead of always running away. Still, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her actions would come back to haunt her. By the time lunch came around, the tension in the cafeteria was palpable. Maya wasn't sure what to expect when she walked through the doors. Would people stare? Would they whisper? Would they finally stop treating her like the invisible girl in the corner? The moment she entered, everything seemed to fall quiet. The usual clatter of trays and chatter among the students seemed to stop, all eyes turning toward her. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to let them see her fear. She wasn't the same girl she had been this morning. She spotted her usual spot at the back of the room, tucked away in the corner near the windows. She headed straight for it, trying to ignore the eyes that followed her every move. But as she sat down, a voice interrupted her. Well, well, look who finally decided to make a scene. Maya looked up to see Jason standing at the edge of her table, flanked by his friends. His expression was different now. There was no cocky grin, no arrogance. Instead, there was a coldness to him, a quiet rage simmering beneath the surface. He was angry, and Maya knew why. She had humiliated him. She had taken something from him, something he wasn't used to losing. But she wasn't afraid of him anymore. You really think you can just do that and walk away? Jason said, his voice low but laced with menace. You think you can mess with me and not face the consequences? Maya didn't respond immediately. She let his words hang in the air, the weight of them pressing down on her. She knew what was coming. She had known it would come to this, but that didn't make it easier to face. I didn't want to fight, Maya said finally, her voice steady. I didn't want to make a scene. But you pushed me. Jason's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You've got a lot of nerve, Maya, but don't think this is over. I'm not letting you get away with this. Maya stood up, her hands curling into fists. She wasn't scared of him anymore. She had proven that she was capable of defending herself, of standing her ground, and she wasn't going to back down now. I'm not afraid of you, she said, her voice unwavering. And I don't need your approval. I'm done hiding. Jason looked taken aback by her response. For a moment, there was silence between them, the entire cafeteria holding its breath. Maya could feel the tension, but she stood firm, refusing to let him intimidate her. Jason's friends shifted uneasily behind him, but he didn't break eye contact with Maya. You're making a big mistake, he said, his voice tinged with anger. You don't know what you're messing with. I don't need to know, Maya replied. I know enough. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jason standing there, his face twisted in frustration. The eyes that had followed her when she entered the room were now fixed on her as she left. But this time, they weren't full of pity. They weren't mocking her. They were watching her with something else, something she had never seen before. Respect. Maya wasn't sure what would happen next. She didn't know if Jason would follow through on his threats or if the attention she had received would turn into something worse. But what she did know was that she had changed. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. She had proven to herself that she wasn't just the quiet girl in the corner anymore. She was strong. She was powerful. And no one, not even Jason, could take that away from her. As the school day came to a close, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. Free from the fear, free from the torment, and free from the silence that had once held her captive. It wasn't over. Not yet. But Maya knew that no matter what happened, she would face it head on. She had already taken the first step. The rest of the journey was up to her. The days that followed the cafeteria incident felt like a whirlwind to Maya. She couldn't quite shake the sense of disbelief that clung to her. But at the same time, there was an undeniable shift inside her, a change that had occurred not just in the way others saw her, but in the way she saw herself. For years, Maya had been hiding behind her quiet, reserved demeanor, letting the world walk all over her, keeping her emotions locked up tightly. But now, after standing up to Jason and his friends, she was beginning to realize that she didn't have to be the invisible girl anymore. The whispers in the halls had only grown louder in the days that followed. Maya was no longer just the quiet girl. She was the girl who stood up to Jason, the girl who took him down. It wasn't just the students who were talking about it. Teachers, even the principal, had heard about the altercation. Some saw it as a victory, a rare moment of someone standing up to the school's bullies. Others, however, were more skeptical. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know what Maya had been through before that moment. Maya's first class of the day was history, and she walked into the room with her head held high. The usual chatter in the room had paused the moment she entered, and once again, all eyes were on her. She could feel the weight of their stares, but it wasn't the same as before. Before, it had felt like the weight of judgment. Now it felt more like curiosity, like people were finally starting to notice her, really notice her for the first time. She took her seat, her heart still racing, but this time she welcomed the attention. What's up with you, Maya? Aisha, her friend, slid into the seat next to her, giving her a puzzled look. I've never seen you act like this. What happened? Maya gave Aisha a small smile, but it was different this time. It wasn't a nervous smile or a forced one. It was a real one that reached her eyes. I don't know, Aisha. I guess I just realized that I've been letting people walk all over me for too long, and I'm tired of it. Aisha raised an eyebrow, her eyes scanning Maya's face for any signs of uncertainty. You're serious? Maya nodded, her hands resting on her desk. Yeah. I've been practicing MMA for years, but I've always kept it a secret. I thought if I just stayed out of everyone's way, they'd leave me alone. But now I see that being invisible isn't the answer. I'm not going to hide anymore. Aisha stared at her, processing Maya's words. But you can't just expect things to be fine after one day. Jason's probably planning something. Maya let out a sigh. I know, but I'm not scared anymore. Aisha looked at her, a mix of concern and admiration in her eyes. You're starting to sound a lot like the girl I've always known you could be. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt something stir inside her. A sense of purpose. She had spent so long hiding in the shadows trying to avoid conflict, but now she understood. It wasn't about avoiding confrontation. It was about facing it head-on and taking control of her own story. She wasn't going to let fear rule her life anymore. As the day went on, Maya found herself surrounded by whispers and stares from her classmates. But instead of shrinking back, she stood tall. Her steps felt lighter, her heart stronger. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Jason wouldn't let her get away with what had happened so easily. But Maya was ready for whatever came next. By the time lunch arrived, Maya was starting to feel the weight of the situation. Jason hadn't said anything to her directly since the confrontation, but she knew it was only a matter of time before he would come after her. As she entered the cafeteria, she scanned the room, her eyes automatically landing on the table where Jason and his friends usually sat. They were all there, as expected, but this time, there was something different about them. Jason wasn't sitting at the head of the table, his usual position of power. Instead, he was sitting in the middle, flanked by two of his friends. His posture was tense, and his eyes kept flicking over to Maya, who sat by herself at her usual corner of the room. She didn't need to look around to know that the whole cafeteria was watching her. She felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't scared anymore. Jason and his friends might try to intimidate her, but she wasn't going to back down. Maya knew who she was now. She knew what she was capable of. And that knowledge gave her strength. Maya picked up her tray and walked toward her usual spot, her eyes never leaving Jason. As she passed his table, Jason shot her a cold look, his jaw clenched tightly. She could feel the tension in the air, but she didn't flinch. She didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. As she sat down, Maya could hear the hushed conversations around her. Some students were still whispering about her, others watching her carefully like she was some kind of spectacle. Maya wasn't sure what to make of it. She didn't want to be the center of attention, but part of her couldn't deny that it felt good. For once, people were paying attention to her, not because she was the quiet, invisible girl, but because she had stood up for herself. Jason's voice suddenly cut through the chatter. You think this is over, Maya? He called across the room, his tone low but filled with malice. You think you can just do what you did and walk away? You're in way over your head. Maya looked up, meeting his eyes. For a moment, she saw the familiar arrogance in his gaze, but it was different this time. She could see the fear behind it. Jason was scared. He had underestimated her, and now he was trying to save face. I'm not going anywhere, Jason, Maya replied calmly, her voice carrying across the room. I'm done running. There was a brief moment of silence, and then Jason sneered. You're making a big mistake, Maya. You've messed with the wrong person. Maya didn't respond. She didn't need to. Jason had already said everything he needed to say. The room had fallen silent, and Maya could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her. But instead of feeling nervous or uncomfortable, she felt powerful. The rest of lunch was uneventful, but the tension lingered in the air. Maya knew this wasn't over. Jason wasn't the type to let things slide, but she also knew that she wasn't the same person who had walked into the cafeteria just a few days ago. She had found her strength, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. As the bell rang to signal the end of lunch, Maya gathered her things and stood up. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. She wasn't going to hide anymore, and no one, not even Jason, was going to make her feel small again. The following days at Jefferson High felt like they stretched on endlessly. The weight of what had happened, the tension with Jason and the whispers that followed her wherever she went, was hard to shake. Maya had expected some fallout after her confrontation with him, but she wasn't prepared for the way everything seemed to change overnight. Her world felt different now, like she was walking through the same hallways, but everything had shifted and she wasn't sure if she was walking alone anymore. At first, it was the stairs. Everywhere she went, people looked at her differently, some with curiosity, some with fear, and a few with admiration. It was all new territory for her, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. Maya had never been one to thrive under attention. She preferred the quiet solitude of being unnoticed, but now she was a topic of conversation, not just among her classmates, but among the teachers too. Word had spread about what happened in the cafeteria. Some students were calling it a victory, a rare moment where someone stood up to Jason. Others whispered that it was just the beginning, a spark that would lead to something bigger. Maya hadn't expected to become some kind of hero. That wasn't why she'd done it. It wasn't about getting praise or respect from her peers. It was about reclaiming her power, her voice. She had stood up for herself, and that was enough. But still, she couldn't ignore the way people were looking at her now. It felt strange, like she was no longer the same person, like she had become someone else, someone who was capable of standing her ground. The next day, as she walked to her locker, she noticed a small group of students gathered near the vending machines. Their hushed conversation seemed to stop as she approached, and for a moment, Maya felt her heart race. She wasn't sure if they were talking about her or if it was just coincidence, but as she walked past, she heard a voice she recognized. "You know, I heard Maya actually beat Jason in front of the whole school," said one of the girls, her voice filled with awe. "Can you believe that?" Maya tried to act normal, but her mind was reeling. She hadn't expected people to talk about it so openly. The thought of Jason, lying on the floor, completely defeated, was still fresh in her mind. She had never imagined herself in a situation like that. But now, hearing others talk about it, it was as if the entire school had been waiting for someone to stand up to him, and she had just given them the courage to do so. "That's crazy," another girl responded. "Jason's been bullying people for years. No one's ever dared to put him in his place like that." Maya didn't stop to listen further. She kept walking, trying to shake the strange feeling in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was pride or something else entirely. All she knew was that she had acted, and now the consequences of her actions were starting to settle in. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Later that day, she found herself walking toward her next class when she noticed Jason standing by the lockers. He was surrounded by his usual group of friends, but there was something different about the way they were looking at him. They didn't seem to be listening to him like they normally did. Jason, usually the one calling the shots, looked off. His posture was rigid, and he wasn't making eye contact with anyone. Maya walked past them, her heart pounding in her chest. She was used to Jason's intimidating presence, but now, there was something unsettling about him. As she passed, she overheard him speaking to his friends in a low voice. "Don't think this is over," Jason muttered, his tone cold and angry. "She'll regret what she did. I'll make sure of it." Maya didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the anger in his words, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced him once, and she knew she could do it again. The difference now was that she wasn't the same person she had been before. Jason's words didn't carry the same weight they once did. She wasn't the quiet, invisible girl anymore. She wasn't the girl who would cower in the face of fear. She was Maya Williams, a fighter, someone who had stood up for herself and proven that she could handle whatever life threw her way. But as the day wore on, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Jason wasn't going to let things slide. He was angry, and when Jason was angry, he didn't back down. The rumors about what had happened in the cafeteria were spreading like wildfire, and Jason wasn't someone who liked being humiliated in front of the entire school. Maya knew that deep down he was plotting his revenge. That afternoon, after the final bell rang, Maya headed to the gym for her usual training session. It was her sanctuary, the one place where she could focus on herself and her skills. MMA was where she felt truly in control. It was where she felt like she could be herself, without the pressures of the outside world. As she entered the gym, the familiar smell of sweat and rubber mats filled her nostrils. Her coach, a former MMA champion named Coach Mitchell, was already there, stretching and preparing for the session. He noticed Maya as she walked in, giving her a small nod of acknowledgement. "Feeling all right today?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face. Maya nodded. a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Yeah, just a little tired. Coach Mitchell raised an eyebrow. You sure? You don't look tired. Looks like you've got a lot of energy to me. Maya glanced at the mats, taking a deep breath. I'm fine, Coach, just a lot on my mind. Coach Mitchell studied her for a moment, his gaze sharp. You're still not used to all the attention, huh? Maya hesitated. It's not just that. I'm still trying to process everything that happened. The cafeteria, Jason, the whole school talking about me. I don't know what to do with all of it. Coach Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. It's a big change, no doubt. But remember, you're in control here. That's why you train, right? To gain control over yourself and your reactions. This isn't about Jason, this is about you. Maya nodded, grateful for his words. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever came next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to let fear control her. She had fought to get to this point, and she wasn't about to let Jason or anyone else take that from her. As the training session began, Maya focused on the routine. She threw punches, kicked, and practiced her grappling techniques, each movement fluid and purposeful. For that hour, all of her worries, all of her doubts disappeared. It was just her and the mat, the only place where she felt truly at peace. But as she left the gym that afternoon, her thoughts returned to Jason. She knew it wasn't over. He wouldn't let it go. And while part of her wanted to run, to stay out of his way and avoid more conflict, another part of her knew that she couldn't do that. She had already stepped into the ring once, and now she was ready for whatever came next. The week after the cafeteria incident felt like an emotional roller coaster for Maya. While some of her classmates now treated her with newfound respect, others still whispered about her behind her back. The rumors about Jason's humiliating defeat spread faster than she had anticipated. Most of them were exaggerated. Stories about her beating Jason into submission, about her being some kind of unstoppable force. Some even started calling her the fighter behind her back. But that wasn't the way Maya saw herself. She wasn't some mythical figure or superhero. She was just Maya, the quiet girl who had finally decided to fight back. However, Jason didn't let the rumors die. He wasn't the kind of person who let his ego be bruised without retaliating. Maya could feel it in the air. There was something simmering beneath the surface, something he wasn't going to let go of. She had done the unthinkable by standing up to him. And in his eyes, that was unforgivable. It wasn't long before the tension between them began to build again. The days grew heavier, and each time Maya passed Jason in the hallway, she could feel his eyes on her. His gaze was colder than before, filled with spite, like he was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. She wasn't afraid of him anymore, but she knew that the quiet animosity was only going to grow. Maya's biggest challenge, however, wasn't just dealing with Jason. It was the fear of what might happen next. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever Jason had planned, but part of her knew that this was a test of her resilience. It wasn't just about facing him anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could handle the consequences of standing up for who she was. The moment of truth came on a Thursday afternoon after school. Maya had just finished her training session at the gym and was heading to the parking lot when she saw Jason standing by his car, waiting for her. His posture was rigid, his face locked in a scowl. A few of his friends were standing nearby, but they weren't talking. They were just watching, as if they were waiting for something to happen. Maya stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. She had known this was coming, but she wasn't sure what to expect. She had faced him before, but this time it felt different. She wasn't sure if it was the way Jason was standing, like he was ready for a fight, or if it was the fact that he had gathered a small audience. But whatever it was, Maya felt her pulse quicken. Jason took a step toward her, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and frustration. You really think you can just walk around here like nothing happened? He spat. You embarrassed me in front of the entire school. You think I'm just going to let that slide? Maya stood her ground, meeting his gaze. I didn't do anything to you, Jason. You brought this on yourself. He let out a harsh laugh. Oh, is that what you think? You really think you've got the upper hand now, don't you? You might have caught me off guard once, but that doesn't mean you've won. I'm not going to let you get away with it. Maya could feel the anger rising within her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had been in situations like this before. She had trained for moments like this. Her MMA training had taught her the value of control, the importance of not letting emotions cloud her judgment. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about standing her ground, maintaining her strength. "I'm not afraid of you, Jason," Maya said, her voice steady but firm. "I'm not backing down." Jason's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Maya thought he might try to push her again. But instead he glanced over his shoulder at his friends, who were silently watching the interaction. One of them, a guy named Brad, spoke up. "Jason, don't do this," Brad said, his voice low. "You're just making it worse. Let it go." Jason didn't respond to Brad. Instead, he stepped closer to Maya, his voice low and threatening. "You think you've got all the answers, don't you? You think you're better than me now? Well, let's see if you're really as tough as you think you are." In that moment, Maya knew what he was doing. He was trying to provoke her, trying to get a reaction out of her. He wanted to show everyone that he wasn't afraid of her, that he was still in control. But Maya wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. "I'm not here to fight you, Jason," she said, her voice calm. "I'm here because I deserve to be. I deserve to be treated with respect, just like everyone else. And if you can't understand that, then that's your problem, not mine." Jason stood there for a moment, staring at her, as if weighing his options. His fists clenched, and Maya braced herself, ready for whatever he might do next. But then, to her surprise, he took a step back, his shoulders slumping slightly. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate, but there was still a lingering unease. "Whatever," he muttered, turning away. "You'll regret this." Maya watched as Jason walked toward his car, his friends following behind him. They didn't say anything, just walked in silence. Maya stood there, frozen for a moment, unsure of what had just happened. She had expected him to do something, to escalate the situation, but instead, he had walked away. It wasn't the closure she had hoped for, but it was something. It was a victory in its own way. Maya had stood up to him, faced his threats head-on, and come out of it stronger than before. She didn't know if Jason would try something again, but for now she had proven to herself that she could handle whatever came her way. As she walked to her car, a sense of relief washed over her. She had faced her biggest test yet and had passed it. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into school just a few weeks ago. She was someone who had learned to stand up for herself, someone who had discovered her own strength, and that was the most important thing of all. Maya knew that her journey wasn't over. Jason might come back, or there might be new challenges ahead, but she wasn't afraid. She had found her voice, and she wasn't going to let anyone silence her again. The days after Jason's attempted confrontation felt like they passed in a blur. Maya's life had changed, but not in the way she had expected. She hadn't expected the world to suddenly start treating her differently. Sure, people now noticed her, some with admiration, others with fear, but it wasn't just about the attention anymore. She was changing inside, and that was the most unsettling part. For the first time in her life, she was starting to feel like she truly knew who she was. But Jason wasn't done with her yet. The whispers and stares were one thing, but the real test was yet to come. Maya knew Jason would eventually make his move. It was inevitable. He couldn't let his pride be hurt without trying to regain his control. And so she braced herself for what was coming. It happened on a Monday morning. Maya had just finished her first class and was heading to the library when she noticed something out of place. The halls, usually filled with the hum of chatter and movement, were eerily quiet. Her footsteps echoed on the tile as she walked, and that's when she heard it. Footsteps behind her. She didn't need to look over her shoulder to know who it was. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. Maya stopped in her tracks and turned slowly. Sure enough, Jason stood a few feet away, his expression dark, his jaw clenched. His usual entourage was nowhere to be seen. This wasn't a public display like the last time. It was just him, and that made it all the more serious. "Thought you could just walk away, huh?" Jason said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm not done with you, Maya." Maya didn't flinch. She stood tall, her back straight, her eyes locked onto his. She wasn't afraid of him anymore, and she wasn't going to let him intimidate her. "I didn't start this, Jason," Maya said evenly. "You did. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not going to let you keep trying to make my life miserable." Jason took a step forward, closing the distance between them. He wasn't physically imposing, but the anger radiating from him made him seem bigger, more dangerous. Maya could see the frustration in his eyes, the way his hands were trembling at his sides, a clear sign of how out of control he felt. "You think you can just walk in here and be the big hero?" Jason sneered. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. You'll never belong here." Maya felt a rush of anger build inside her, but she pushed it back. She had learned how to control her emotions, how to keep them in check. She wasn't going to let him provoke her into a fight. Not again. Not this time. I don't need to belong here, Jason, she said, her voice cool but firm. I'm not here to make friends with people like you. I'm here to be myself. You think I care about your opinion? I don't, Jason's eyes flashed with rage. You should, he spat. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you regret it. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but her resolve remained steady. This wasn't just about fighting. This was about standing her ground. She wasn't going to let him use her fear to control her anymore. If you want to fight me, Jason, fine, Maya said. But know this, I'm not afraid of you. And I'm not backing down. I've trained for years to fight, and not just physically. I've learned how to stand up for myself. You're not the one who gets to decide what happens here anymore. Jason's face twisted in disbelief. You think you're special just because you trained in some gym? You're nothing. You've got no idea what real power is. Maya could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she kept her composure. The difference between you and me, Jason, is that I don't need to prove myself to anyone. I don't need to fight to make myself feel powerful. You're the one who's scared. You're the one who needs to control others to feel like you matter. But you don't. You never did. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jason's face was red with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. Maya stood her ground, feeling her heart beat steadily in her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything that had come before it. Then, to her surprise, Jason took a step back. His anger was still there, but something in him seemed to deflate. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at Maya with a mix of confusion and frustration. I don't need to be here, Jason muttered, almost to himself. This isn't over, though. You'll see. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing alone in the hall. The weight of the moment hung in the air for a few seconds longer. But Maya didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel any sense of relief or triumph. It was just over, for now at least. Maya's body was still tense, and she took a few deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. She hadn't expected that confrontation to go down like that. She had thought Jason would lash out, would try to get physical with her, but instead he seemed to retreat. And though it should have felt like a win, it didn't. As she walked to the library, Maya couldn't help but wonder if this was the calm before the storm. Jason hadn't just given up. He had been wounded, humiliated in front of everyone, and people like him didn't forget that kind of thing easily. There would be consequences. There always were. When Maya arrived at the library, she found a quiet spot in the back, the place where she often went to escape the noise of school. She needed a moment to collect herself, to process everything that had just happened. She pulled out her phone and checked her messages, but it wasn't Aisha's concerned texts or the whispers from her classmates that filled her thoughts. It was Jason. Maya had faced him, stood up to him, and though he had backed down for now, she knew it wasn't over. Jason was just getting started, and Maya had a feeling that what came next would be the real test of her strength, not just physically, but emotionally too. The days that followed the confrontation with Jason were quieter than Maya had expected. Jason didn't retaliate immediately, and Maya found herself wondering whether he had truly given up or was simply waiting for the right moment to strike. But as time passed, she realized something. The longer Jason stayed silent, the more she began to feel the weight of her own transformation. At first, the attention from her classmates had been uncomfortable. People were still talking about the altercation in the cafeteria, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Some students treated her with newfound respect, while others looked at her with fear or suspicion, unsure of what to make of her. Maya's life had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated, but she was learning to navigate this new reality. Jason, on the other hand, seemed to be retreating into himself. The arrogance that had once been his trademark was gone, replaced by an air of uncertainty. He no longer strutted down the halls like he owned the place. Instead, he kept his head down, his eyes avoiding hers whenever they crossed paths. For a moment, Maya wondered if he was afraid of her, but that thought quickly passed. Jason wasn't the type to admit fear. No, he was plotting something. She could feel it. The tension in the school was palpable, but it wasn't just about Jason anymore. Maya had crossed a threshold and there was no going back. She had stood up to Jason, and in doing so, she had proven something to herself. She had proven that she wasn't the quiet, invisible girl she had once been. She was strong, and she had the power to defend herself, not just with her fists, but with her voice, her presence, and her conviction. But Maya wasn't just a fighter. She was also a student, And as the days turned into weeks, she found herself struggling to balance her training with her academic responsibilities. School had always been a challenge for Maya. She wasn't the best student, and her grades often reflected her lack of interest. But after everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just going to survive high school. She was going to thrive. She owed it to herself to be the best version of herself, both inside and outside the gym. One afternoon, after school, Maya found herself in the library, sitting at her usual spot in the back corner. The library had always been a sanctuary for her, a quiet place where she could focus and escape the chaos of the outside world. As she flipped through a textbook, her mind wandered, as it often did. She thought about her journey, the years of training, the countless hours spent perfecting her skills, and the way she had changed, not just in the gym, but in her heart. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her, familiar footsteps that made her heart skip a beat. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Maya had learned to recognize Jason's presence long ago, but this time she didn't feel the same dread that had once overtaken her. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. "Hey." Jason's voice was quieter than she expected, almost hesitant. "Can we talk?" Maya turned slowly, her gaze meeting his. He was standing a few feet away, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie. He looked different. His usual cocky demeanor was replaced by something that resembled vulnerability, and for a moment Maya didn't know what to make of it. "What do you want, Jason?" Maya asked, her voice steady but curious. Jason shifted his weight nervously, his eyes darting around the room. "I know I've been a jerk," he said, his tone surprisingly genuine. "I've treated you like crap for no reason, and I don't know. I guess I owe you an apology." Maya raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to say. She had never expected Jason to apologize, let alone do so in such a sincere way. She had always thought of him as a bully, someone who thrived on making others feel small. But this was different. "Apology accepted," Maya said simply, though part of her wasn't sure if she believed it. Jason's apology didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was a step forward. It was proof that even the most stubborn people could change. Jason seemed to relax a little at her words, though his discomfort was still evident. "I don't know why I treated you like that," he admitted. "It's like I was just trying to keep control of everything, you know? And I couldn't stand it when someone like you, someone who just keeps to themselves, stepped out of line. But I get it now. You're not weak. You never were." Maya nodded slowly, processing his words. "I never wanted to be weak," she said quietly. "I've spent my whole life hiding because I thought that was the only way to survive. But I learned that I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to be afraid." Jason looked at her, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "You're right. And I guess I've been afraid too. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of people seeing me as weak." He sighed, shaking his head. "I guess I have some growing up to do." Maya smiled, though it wasn't one of triumph or victory. It was a smile of understanding. "We all do," she said softly. "But it's not about being perfect. It's about learning from our mistakes and growing because of them." There was a long pause, and for the first time, Maya didn't feel the need to say anything more. Jason had said what he needed to say. He had apologized, and that was enough. She didn't need his forgiveness, and she certainly didn't need to prove anything to him. Maya had already proven everything she needed to prove to herself. Jason looked like he was about to say something else, but stopped himself, glancing at the clock on the wall. "I should get going," he said. I wanted to clear the air." "Thanks, Maya." Maya nodded, her heart still pounding, but for a different reason now. "Good luck, Jason." As he turned to leave, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Not just with Jason, but with everything. She had fought for her place in the world, and she had come out on top. It wasn't just about winning a physical fight. It was about finding the strength within herself to stand up, to take control of her own life, and to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. Maya knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to face, but she also knew that she was no longer the quiet girl who let people walk all over her. She was someone who had learned to fight, not just with her body, but with her heart and mind. As the school year continued, Maya walked through the halls with her head held high. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone anymore. She had already done that. She had already won. And now it was time for her to live the life she had always deserved.